I'd like to go over to Stassja. She's the inaugural winner of the Magdalene Burns Award this year in Brisbane. So now IWD Brisbane Meanjin give 2 awards to radical feminists. So congratulations, Stassja. What an amazing honour.
On Saturday, 26th of February this year, the Coalition for Biological Reality successfully held our first ever event, Gender Identity in Law. Our wonderful chairperson was Bronwyn Winter, and our speakers were Senator Claire Chandler, Professor Diana Kenny, Ex-Lancic, Associate Professor Holly Lawford-Smith, Professor Patrick Parkinson, and lawyer Catherine Deeves. It was actually not my idea. Isla McGregor's idea was to hold this event, and she specifically wanted Hobart Town Hall. She'd been in contact with a couple of Tasmanian gender critical women, and they initially took the lead in doing the organising. So I really can't take all the credit. It was definitely a team effort. There was a bit to organise: the invitation list, advertising, audio-visual, security guards, and the speakers. Originally, the event was planned for August 2021, but due to COVID travel restrictions, we were forced to postpone. We picked another tentative date for November 2021, but again, the uncertainty caused by COVID, we decided not to risk it and went with February this year instead. The postponement put in motion a number of things. One of the 2 lead organisers pulled out, unfortunately. When planning for the August date, the workload involved in organising this event had affected her performance at work, in her workplace. She wasn't double vaxxed, so at that point she couldn't attend in person. And she was also in the difficult position of having a family member who is trans identified, which meant she couldn't be public about her involvement. So she pulled out, and that meant I had to step up and do a bunch of organising. Also, during this interval, one of our original speakers was Paulie Johnson, who is a man who dresses as a woman, but still goes by he, him pronouns. He cracked the sads with me. We originally involved him as we thought it was important to include a transgender voice so that we wouldn't be accused of transphobia. But the problem with that is, as I'm sure many of you will be aware, is that they're going to accuse you of transphobia no matter how you approach these issues. So if you would want to lead one of these events, you're just going to have to ignore the accusations of transphobia. Don't pay it any attention. Don't delude yourself that you're going to avoid that label. This is a little bit off topic, but I do want to cover it. Paulie Johnson got upset with me because I made a public Facebook post on the Coalition's page. It was a screenshot of a man talking about terrible complications from his sex change surgery. And I just posed the question, are these surgeries ethical? Should they be performed at all, even on adults? And this really upset him. He accused the Coalition of being right-wing conservatives and wanting to take away transgender healthcare. And he wrote a nasty letter to the Mercury newspaper in Tasmania about us, and which thankfully didn't get printed. And then interestingly, on Twitter, he had been complaining about radical feminists weaponizing autogynephilia. So I think from this and the circumstances of his life, he's married with children, that he probably has autogynephilia himself. So that was a real learning experience for me. I can see that Posey Parker, for example, is correct. There is no working with these guys. If they want to start their own transgender critical group they can. But the result of that whole experience was that I changed the policy of our private Facebook group and removed all the trans identifying people. There are only 4 or 5 of them, so that we don't have to tippy-toe around them anymore. The postponement also gave Hobart City Councillor Jax Fox, a woman who pretends she is without biological sex and identifies as non-binary, it gave her the opportunity to raise the issue at a Hobart City Council meeting where she attempted to have our event cancelled on the grounds that we would be in breach of Tasmanian anti-discrimination law and in breach of council policy. Motion failed. Her and 2 other women, the Lord Mayor and the Deputy Lord Mayor, voted in favour of cancelling us, but the rest of the council, even those that have publicly stated support for transgender rights over the rights of women, they all voted against it. So this gave us media attention in Tasmania. A number of articles ran in the Tasmanian Mercury newspaper, including miraculously an op-ed by Isla McGregor, but also an op-ed by Equality Tasmania's trans-identified female, Charlie Burton. I'd like to say Isla McGregor is a phenomenal campaigner and she knows how to work the media. So after ABC Radio Hobart ran 2 segments, one featuring non-binary woman Jax Fox and another featuring Lord Mayor Anna Reynolds, who is also a Greens Party member from what I hear, Isla phoned the station and demanded a right of reply, and she got me a spot on ABC Radio. The segment was recorded, not live to air, and I went into detail about autogynephilia and made it clear that our position on women's sports is the majority opinion based on the polling undertaken by the organisation Binary Australia. This information was edited out of the interview. Surprise, surprise. I'm pretty sure this was, however, a first for Australia to get a gender critical voice onto the ABC anywhere in the country. About 1 month prior to the event, our security firm, who were meant to provide 4 security guards on the day, pulled out. They had been threatened by their major client, who made up around 90% of their work, that if they worked at our event, he would drop them as contractors. That's corporate blackmail. So his suspicion was that one of his employees has a trans-identified child, and that employee must have contacted his major client, tipped him off, and in turn threatened this guy's livelihood. So at this point, we were aware that Charlie Burton of Equality Tasmania was organising a protest, so we really needed security guards. Thankfully, a lovely couple from Hobart got involved in helping us organise the event. I think they were quite recently had reached peak trans. The husband in that couple had experience working as a security guard, and he started liaising with Hobart Police, who weren't much help, liaising with town hall staff. He made a few trips to the town hall to get the lay of the land and sort of work out where the protesters might cause problems for us. The wife in that couple called around to virtually every single security firm in Hobart. I think it was 13 in total. They were all declining the job. So we suspect that there may have been some shady McCarthy-style blacklisting going on behind the scenes. Eventually, thank God, she found a firm in Launceston, which is 3 hours away from Hobart, and they agreed to do the job. So I arrived in Hobart about a week prior to the event, and Isla McGregor put me to work. One of the days we drove around Hobart for about 5 hours, I reckon, hand delivering invitations to all sorts of prominent people. We did 3 media releases that week. It just so happened that the same week I was there, so was Scott Morrison, and he had just announced that he was in support of Senator Claire Chandler's Save Women's Sports bill. So that required a media release as well. We sent out more email invitations. I was getting last minute bookings for the event, which required a bit of admin work. I did the tickets manually. I'm glad I did it that way because we did get some ugly attempts to book out all the tickets from trans activists. The funniest of those fake bookings was from an email address, which was, "You TERF assholes, you are not feminists, just bigots," at hotmail.com. And they tried to book 666, ooh, a scary number, tickets. So if we had used Eventbrite or one of those sort of platforms, I wouldn't have had control over who was booking. So it was a bit of work, but I'm glad we did it that way. On the day of the event, I was very nervous. My major concern was that we would get like 20 people show up. That wasn't the case. Our security volunteer did a head count and there were about 80 attendees. The transgender protesters initially congregated across the road in a city garden square. The Tasmanian media reported that there were 200 of them, whereas our security guy counted about 120. Another thing Isla and I had done during the week in the lead up was design and get printed some very large signs saying the time for no debate is over and transgender laws discriminate against girls and women. We had a number of volunteers out the front of the town hall holding these and other signs. To our aggravation, 2 transgender flags were flying out the front of the town hall. One of our volunteers sort of asked the employee of Hobart City Council who was working the event, you know, how did this come about? And he revealed it was the Lord Mayor, Anna Reynolds, who had given the order that morning. Isla McGregor has followed this up at a council meeting and the mayor has denied that it was her. So we're still following up on that. I'll be demanding our money back for the hall hire, see how we go. Things were calm to speak with, to start with, sorry. Our speakers, Bronwyn, Claire, Holly and Kath, met at a coffee shop down the road and all arrived together. They were expecting a mob of trans protesters there on the city hall, town hall steps, but they hadn't moved over from the garden square yet. And when Holly saw me, she walked over and gave me a big hug, which was awesome because I was really nervous at that point. And eventually the protesters did move over to their town hall. And look, I missed a lot of that action. I was running around doing other stuff, but they had 2 TV crews filming them and their concerns, while our press conference attracted 1 junior SBS reporter who was really only interested in Claire Chandler's Save Women's Sports bill. The protesters were instructed to stay off the steps. They didn't comply. I believe our security guards got involved and sort of pushed them back. One of our volunteers described how they backed up 1 step at a time in an attempt to cover our signs with their signs. And she said the idiot standing in front of her was holding a makeshift sign that was on the back of an Amazon delivery box. And this person had left the delivery address sticker on the box. So our protester, Sonia, her and her friend just started reading out the name and address over and over of where this guy lives. And he's just slowly taken his sign down. When the announcement was made that the event was starting, the protesters surged to try and get into the building. Our security pushed them back. A Hobart City councillor tried to barge his way through, claiming that he had a right to be there because he's a councillor, but he wasn't on the door list. He became really unhinged about being denied entry, but, you know, really we just wanted to know we didn't know he was a councillor. We wanted to know who he was and why hadn't he booked a ticket. And then he threatened our security guards and said their company would never work a Hobart City Council event ever again, and just drama. The event itself went well. There were about 5 transgender supporters in the audience, but none of them caused any problems. We had 3 speakers presenting in person and 3 presenting by Zoom. I wouldn't do it that way again. There were serious technical issues with Exelantic's connection, so that wasted about 10 minutes. And then when she had to give up on sharing her slides, and then her audio was terrible. I couldn't understand a word of what she was saying, so that was a bit embarrassing, but the uploaded recording is fine. If anyone wants to watch it, you can hear her clearly. Senator Claire Chandler was our keynote speaker. She told me quietly that she thought her toughest week in politics was tabling that women's sports bill. But then when Morrison announced his support for the bill, it had been a week of difficult interviews and media giving her a hard time, downplaying the importance of the bill. But she got quite the almost standing ovation. The audience clapped and cheered for her for quite some time. So I think being in a room of supporters really made up for her having had a terrible week that week. Diana Kenny spoke on rapid onset gender dysphoria and social contagion via Zoom. We had invited American woman Exelantic to speak as a desister, but she only briefly touched upon that and then moved on to her theories around gender identity as a modern religion. Holly Lawford-Smith spoke on gender identity propaganda, and that was quite entertaining, got a few laughs. Patrick Parkinson spoke via Zoom on the implications of gay conversion therapy laws, and also that also ban so-called gender identity conversion therapy. There are a few issues with his connection as well, which is disappointing. And Kath Deeves of Save Women's Sport Australasia spoke, of course, on women's sports. So I would do a few things differently if we were to do this over. I've certainly learnt from running this event. All up, I'm quite proud that we pulled it off and attracted 80 people. We spent roughly 3,000 all up, and I'd like to thank anyone watching that donated to that, including a certain major donor that put in $1,000, which was fantastic. So it would be great to be able to repeat this in every major city around Australia. So I'd just like to put the call out if anyone would like to take the lead in your state, please get in touch. Thank you.